"You're just a guest," he said at the wedding. "I walked out with the entire budget." Olivia Harper stood just inside the grand entrance of the Caldwell estate, clutching her clipboard like a lifeline. The marble floors gleamed under the crystal chandeliers, and the air was thick with the scent of expensive orchids and polished wood. Even after months of preparation, the unmistakable tension that hung around this wedding was suffocating. As a young event planner, trying to carve her niche in the ruthless world of high society weddings, Olivia had stepped into countless lavish venues, but none quite like this. The Caldwell mansion wasn't just a home, it was a kingdom ruled by Veronica Caldwell, a woman with an iron grip on every detail and no patience for anyone beneath her social station. Olivia was acutely aware of the eyes on her, not just from the staff or suppliers bustling about, but from the real players, the elite guests, and most intimidatingly, Veronica herself. The bride wore her signature perfected smile, icy and calculated, her sharp eyes darting over Olivia with undisguised disdain. "You're just a guest here," Veronica had muttered coldly during their last meeting. Her voice barely above a whisper, but loud enough for Olivia to hear. The words clung to Olivia's skin, a humiliating reminder of her invisible position in this glittering world she had dreamed of being a part of. The day's challenges were mounting. Olivia had already dealt with a last-minute florist cancellation and a caterer who was threatening to back out due to a payment dispute. But those headaches paled in comparison to Veronica's looming presence. The bride's icy glare was enough to make Olivia's heart race, her confidence waning under the weight of judgment and silent scorn. Just moments ago, during a tense gathering in the sprawling living room, Veronica stared her down with that familiar sneer that made Olivia feel smaller with every breath. "You're nothing more than a shadow at our celebration." Veronica's sharp voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "You think your role is important. Remember, you're a guest here. Nothing more." The room fell into a hush, eyes shifting between the two women. Olivia's cheeks burned. All her hard work seemed to vanish beneath the cruel injustice of that statement. She felt the weight of countless eyes pinning her in place, whispering their unspoken judgments. The air grew heavier, the glittering wedding preparations suddenly feeling like a cage. She wanted to melt into the floor, disappear from the opulence and cruelty surrounding her. But deep inside, a flicker of something stronger stirred, a resolve not to be dismissed so easily. Even as humiliation threatened to break her, Olivia clenched her jaw, refusing to let the sting of Veronica's words define her standing or her worth. The echoes of that final cruel assertion lingered in the air. "You're just a guest." But something in Olivia's heart whispered otherwise. The room thrummed with anticipation and unspoken tensions, the afternoon sun casting long shadows through the tall windows. Olivia's breaths came fast, but her mind was already racing beyond the hurt, searching for a way to reclaim her dignity before this event and her life spiraled even further out of control. The stage was set for a moment that would change everything, but no one yet knew just how far Olivia Harper was willing to go. The sting of Veronica's words lingered like a cold shadow as Olivia retreated to the quiet corner of the grand hall. The murmurs among the guests felt like daggers, soft whispers laden with judgment, casting doubts on her competence and place in this world of glaring wealth and rigid hierarchy. She fought to steady her shaking hands, the clipboard suddenly feeling heavier in her grasp. Years of hard work, late nights, and tireless dedication seemed to dissolve under the icy weight of disdain. Olivia's mind spiraled. The unfairness of it all was suffocating. Here she was, pouring her heart and soul into making this wedding a masterpiece, only to be dismissed as a mere guest. Each cruel comment Veronica made had been laced with subtle cruelty, and the socialite's venom didn't stop there. Gossip was already swirling around the room, vendors subtly whispering to one another, casting sideways glances. Even some guests exchanged sneers, their eyes narrowing with thinly veiled superiority. She caught the eye of a few sympathetic faces, an elderly caterer who had once hired Olivia for smaller events, a floristry assistant who gave a faint, encouraging nod, but it was little comfort. The sense of vulnerability swallowed her whole. She felt exposed and invisible, as though she occupied a place where her talents and efforts meant nothing. The humiliation was deep, and tears threatened to spill. But she bit back the urge, clinging desperately to the vestiges of pride she had left. Every part of her screamed to flee, escape this fortress of judgment, and step away from the suffocating glare of the elite. But Olivia knew running away would only reinforce the narrative Veronica wanted. The words echoed relentlessly in her mind. "You're just a guest here." How many times had she been underestimated? How often had shadows like this attempted to eclipse her light? Yet, amid the weight of scorn, a spark flickered. Olivia's thoughts drifted to the countless moments she had faced obstacles and prejudice throughout her career. This wasn't just a wedding or a single insult. It was a microcosm of a larger battle she fought daily, as a woman striving to break through barriers in a world built by and for the privileged. The indignity was cruel, yes, but it was also fueling a growing fire inside her. Her phone vibrated quietly against the polished marble. A message from a trusted colleague. "Stay strong. You're capable of far more than they see." The small gesture bolstered her spirits just enough. Olivia wiped a furtive tear from her cheek and exhaled slowly, grounding herself. She refused to let this moment define her. Instead, she would use it as a catalyst. If the world wanted to see her as nothing more than a guest, she would show them what that guest was truly capable of. Behind the glitter and gossip, Olivia's mind began to schematize her next move. She remembered bits of conversations, small inconsistencies in the budgeting reports, unusual quotes from vendors, and whispered grievances from those squeezed for payment. It wasn't just arrogance or classism at play. It was something much deeper. A system of corruption that threatened to ruin not only the wedding but her reputation as well. Her resolve hardened. To the invisible crowd's shock and Veronica's smug assurance, Olivia was quietly plotting a revelation that would shake the foundations of the Caldwell world. The time for silence was over. The young woman they dismissed as just a guest was about to take center stage, armed not with tears or words of defeat, but with evidence and unyielding courage. If you've ever felt dismissed or underestimated, stay with Olivia's journey. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the fiercest battles ignite from the humblest beginnings. Determined but still shaken, Olivia slipped away from the opulent chaos of the Caldwell mansion to the quiet sanctuary of her small, rented office downtown. The walls around her were far less glamorous than the sprawling estate she'd left behind. But here, away from prying eyes and whispered judgments, she could think clearly. She spread out the documents she had gathered, the invoices, contracts, and suspicious payment records that hinted at a tangled web of deceit among some of the exclusive vendors commissioned for the wedding. It wasn't much, but it was enough to shake her fragile confidence and give her a sliver of hope. Yet, the path ahead was far from smooth. Olivia discovered that peeling back the layers of corruption was like pulling on a tightly knotted thread, one that threatened to unravel much more than just the wedding's budget. The vendors were protective. Some refused to speak, fearing backlash from the powerful Caldwell network. One key supplier, who had been overcharging repeatedly, abruptly stopped answering her calls, and another sent a terse email warning her to mind her place. The pressure mounted, and with each setback, the weight of defeat threatened to drag her under. To complicate matters, she faced skepticism from her own colleagues. Some whispered that challenging the status quo was foolish, that she was risking her fledgling career for a problem much bigger than herself. Even a few teammates subtly distanced themselves, wary of being associated with what some labeled as an impossible fight. At night, when exhaustion settled into her bones, doubt crept in. Was she biting off more than she could chew? Would exposing the truth cost her everything she had worked so hard for? And yet, beneath the swirling uncertainty, a fiercer determination grew. There were rare moments when a kind word or small breakthrough rekindled her spirit. A financial analyst she'd once met at a networking event came forward with advice on how to interpret some of the complex documents she'd uncovered, suggesting a possible link between an unreported influx of cash and vendor kickbacks. A close friend reminded her that the system was rigged but not immune. Sometimes justice required risking everything. These glimmers of encouragement reminded Olivia why she had embarked on this journey in the first place, to prove her worth not just to others, but to herself. But the clock was ticking. The wedding was scheduled within days, and Veronica's impatience had become palpable. At every meeting, the socialite's demanding glare intensified, and her icy remarks grew sharper. If this budget isn't under control by tonight, I'll find someone who can manage this without dragging us through a scandal, Veronica threatened during their latest confrontation, her voice a poisoned dagger that cut through any remaining hopes Olivia held. Those words echoed in Olivia's mind, threatening to shatter her. Yet, even on the brink of despair, Olivia clung to a fragile thread of hope, a belief that with the right move, she could turn everything around. She knew the stakes were higher than just personal pride. This battle was about honesty, fairness, and the courage to stand up against injustice. She wasn't naive. She knew this fight could cost her friendships, status, and opportunities. But the alternative, succumbing to the silent complicity that allowed such corruption to fester, was unacceptable. As darkness fell over the city skyline, Olivia sat at her desk, her eyes scanning over figures and contracts one last time. The room was filled with the quiet hum of determination and uncertainty. What no one suspected was that Olivia was secretly orchestrating a plan that would not only expose the truth, but redefine all the assumptions the Caldwell wedding and its guests had made about her. The question was no longer if she could succeed, but how far she was willing to go to claim the respect and justice she deserved. The morning of the wedding arrived, but instead of excitement, Olivia woke drenched in a cold sweat, her mind racing. The past day's setbacks had culminated in a crushing weight of pressure and isolation. Earlier that week, a major vendor had pulled out last minute, citing irreconcilable differences with her management style, an unmistakable message that her investigation had rattled too many cages. The budget, already stretched thin, now threatened to spiral completely out of control. Olivia felt crushed. The fragile hope she'd summoned in quiet moments, now seeming fragile as glass, ready to shatter. Each interaction with Veronica grew more hostile. The socialite's disdain was now a constant shadow, her cutting remarks echoing louder in Olivia's ears than the bustling wedding preparations. "If you can't get this together, I'll find someone who can," Veronica whispered cruelly during their hasty briefing, her lips curling into a merciless smirk. The words reverberated, suffocating Olivia's resolve. To make matters worse, whispers and rumors of the unraveling budget had leaked. Vendors who had once flirted with opportunities now openly sidestepped responsibility. Even some colleagues, fearing association with the brewing scandal, distanced themselves, leaving Olivia to shoulder the collapsing weight alone. The isolation cut deep, a reminder of how precarious her position truly was. The peak of this torment came in the late afternoon, during the final coordination meeting held just hours before the ceremony. Veronica, radiant in designer black to contrast the bride's pristine white, publicly berated Olivia with a venom that shocked the assembled staff and vendors. Her voice sliced through the decadent atmosphere. "You've made a mockery of my wedding. Amateuring should not be tolerated in my presence. You're a liability, nothing more." Gasps echoed around the room. Olivia's heart thundered, but something inside her refused to break. The humiliation was raw, a deep wound carved openly for all to see. She stood frozen, heat rising to her cheeks, eyes stinging, yet her spirit flared faintly beneath the pain. This was the lowest point she had ever known. Stripped of dignity in front of the very people she had worked tirelessly to please. When the meeting dissolved into uncomfortable silence, Olivia gathered her things quietly and turned to leave. But as she passed through the ornate hallway, a quiet voice stopped her. Nathan, a veteran caterer who'd quietly respected her from the beginning, caught her arm gently. "You don't deserve this," he said, eyes steady. "We see what you're up against. It's not fair." In that brief exchange, warmth blossomed amid the cold rejection. Despite everything, the real allies could still be found, those who recognized integrity and grit beyond social masks. But Olivia knew something critical. Change couldn't come from whispers or secret sympathies. It had to be public, undeniable, disruptive, and she was ready to unleash the truth hidden beneath the pomp and perfection. As she stepped outside into the gathering dusk, Olivia's resolve hardened like steel. The night ahead would either cement her downfall or reveal the fierce strength she'd nurtured inside. The world was watching, and Olivia Harper would no longer be silent. If you've ever faced crushing injustice when all odds seemed against you, stay tuned to see how courage and truth can rewrite even the darkest moments. Days after the unbearable confrontation at the office party, Madison found herself tangled in a web of silence and whispers that followed her cautiously down every hallway. Each glance she caught felt like a restless storm of judgment, a pain far sharper than any words spoken aloud. Her confidence, once vibrant and unshaken, was now a fragile ember struggling to burn in a sea of cold skepticism. The weight of that merciless evening pressed heavily on her chest as she sank into the small, quiet refuge of her apartment, its walls closing in with memories of humiliation all too vivid. But amid the darkness, a faint glimmer of something unexpected began to pierce through, a subtle realization that perhaps her story wasn't over, that she still held the power to change the narrative. On a restless night, scrolling aimlessly through old photos on her phone, Madison paused on an image that captured her laughter and light from happier days. The sharp contrast to her current despair stirred a quiet determination deep inside. She knew the path to reclaiming her dignity wouldn't be easy, but it was hers to take. Encouraged by this newfound resolve, Madison sought solace not just in memory, but in words and connection. She reached out to a few trusted friends, those who had witnessed the kind-hearted woman beneath the storm of gossip and scorn. Their responses were slow but sincere, messages filled with reminders of her strength, her intelligence, and the moments when she had stood tall, unshaken. These lifelines, though faint, rekindled a spark she thought had vanished. Alongside this fragile support, Madison also began to observe, quietly and carefully, the undercurrents running through the workplace. She noticed the subtle manipulations of her rivals, the way false smiles masked darker intentions. Yet, rather than allowing anger to consume her, she channeled her energy into understanding the landscape more clearly. This clarity brought surprising insight. Those who thrived on tearing others down often hid their own insecurities beneath layers of judgment and control. Recognizing their fragility didn't diminish her pain, but offered a new lens, one tinged with empathy rather than vengeance. Still, the road was littered with setbacks. Attempts to engage in projects or express ideas were met with dismissive nods or the cold shoulder of silence. A colleague's whispered comment about her overconfidence cut deeper than any insult deserved. The sting of isolation was real and overwhelming, threatening to swallow the tentative progress she was fighting to make. On one particularly difficult morning, Madison hesitated outside the team meeting room, her hand trembling as it hovered over the door handle. Doubt whispered in her ear, nearly convincing her to retreat. But something inside propelled her through, a whisper of defiance born from the ashes of humiliation. Slowly, Madison began to envision a way to reclaim her narrative, not by shouting louder or seeking revenge, but by embracing truth and authenticity. She started journaling, each word a small step toward healing. Writing became a quiet rebellion, a sanctuary where she could process the hurt and rebuild her identity piece by piece. These pages were not just words. They were promises to herself to rise again. If you've ever faced moments like Madison's, feeling crushed by unfair judgment, yet yearning to rise, remember this: the quiet, unyielding steps toward truth and self-love can become the very foundation of transformation. Sometimes, the most profound strength is born in the stillness between storms. One chilly afternoon, As the sunlight filtered softly through the dusty blinds of Madison's small office cubicle, a message unexpectedly popped up on her screen. It was from Claire, one of the senior managers known for her keen sense of fairness, but also for maintaining a guarded distance from office politics. The message was brief, but carried an unmistakable weight. "Can we talk? I think there are things you need to know." Heart pounding. Madison felt a mix of apprehension and hope as she accepted the invitation for a private meeting. When Madison arrived at Claire's office, the atmosphere was tense yet sincere. Claire closed the door behind them, her face set not with judgment, but with concern. "I've been watching what's been happening," she began carefully, "and it's not right. You've been misunderstood, and even worse, some people have been spreading false stories about you to cover their own mistakes." Madison listened, a flood of emotions washing over her. Relief, disbelief, but also a deep ache for the truth finally being voiced. Claire continued, "There's something else. During the last project, evidence surfaced that it wasn't your error that caused the setback, but a collaboration failure on their part. The facts are there, but many are too quick to judge without seeing the whole picture." She pulled up emails and data she'd quietly collected, piecing together the puzzle with quiet precision. Madison's eyes welled up as clarity replaced the fog of confusion and self-doubt. The humiliation she felt so keenly had been built on lies and misdirection. But the revelation didn't end there. Claire offered Madison support to present these findings to HR and upper management, ensuring the truth would finally come to light. Though nervous, Madison felt an awakening courage, a flame igniting where despair once dwelled. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. "I never thought someone important would stand with me." News of the investigation's commencement trickled through the grapevine, evoking a spectrum of reactions. Those who had eagerly joined the chorus of disparagement found their certainty shaken. Some tried to dismiss the change with sour comments, while others watched, intrigued and uncertain. Madison noticed their shifting gazes, no longer filled with scorn, but with a flicker of respect or hesitation. The day the HR meeting convened, Madison stood patiently as her colleagues filed in. She held her head high, even as whispers swirled around her. Then Claire presented the compiled evidence, clear, irrefutable, and profoundly just. Faces that had once smirked now showed surprise, discomfort, and some rare moments of remorse. The room was hushed, the weight of truth settling over the crowd. As the meeting concluded, Madison felt a renewed sense of agency. The power dynamics were shifting, and she was no longer the silent victim, but an active agent of her own story. The antagonists' grip weakened visibly, their smiles fading, their usual arrogance dampened by undeniable facts. In the days that followed, subtle changes marked the atmosphere at work. Whispered criticism gave way to cautious conversations. Exclusionary glances softened into nods of acknowledgement. Madison's demeanor transformed, too. There was a new calm assurance in her posture, a quiet confidence born not of conquering others, but of reclaiming her own truth. If you've ever found yourself trapped by false accusations or misunderstood in a world quick to judge, take heart. Sometimes the unveiling of truth comes from the most unexpected allies and moments of vulnerability. It's in these moments that courage grows and injustice begins to unravel. Keep faith in your strength to face what lies hidden beneath surface judgments. In the days following the HR meeting, Madison felt a cautious calm settle over the office. But beneath the surface, a quiet storm was brewing. The truth had been revealed. Yet justice was not handed over on a silver platter. It required her to rise further, to stand firm in the face of resistance, from those still clinging to power through lies and manipulation. Still, something inside her was unshakable now, a steady fire fueled by resilience rather than anger. The first real indication of change came during a team meeting. For months, Madison's ideas had been dismissed or ignored. This time, as she presented a detailed plan for a new project, her voice was clear, confident, and unyielding. The barren silence she usually faced broke, replaced by attentive eyes and nods of agreement. Even those who had once sneered now exchanged surprised glances, but Madison wasn't seeking their approval anymore. She was speaking for herself. When the project was greenlit, it wasn't just a professional win, it became a symbolic turning point. Peers and managers alike began to recognize Madison's talents, not just for her work, but for her integrity and perseverance. The antagonists, those who had weaponized deceit and humiliation to maintain their hold, found their influence slipping. Behind closed doors, they scrambled to salvage their reputations, but the damage was done. The office's atmosphere began to shift palpably. Conversations grew more respectful, and the shadow of cruelty lifted, if only slightly. One afternoon, Madison was called into a meeting with the company's director. Attention in the air was thick, but instead of reprimand, she was met with an unexpected offer: leadership in an upcoming initiative designed to foster collaboration and transparency throughout the teams. It was an acknowledgement of her strength, her fairness, and her ability to inspire growth. The very qualities once dismissed as too idealistic had become recognized as assets. Over the following weeks, Madison worked tirelessly, not just on projects, but to rebuild the community fractured by mistrust. She listened deeply, encouraged open dialogue, and created spaces where previously unheard voices could be shared. The transformation wasn't instantaneous or perfect, but it was real. More than her professional reputation restored, Madison reclaimed her dignity and her place in a space that once sought to break her. The once smug expressions of her adversaries faded into reluctant respect. Some even approached her privately, offering apologies or tentative gestures of peace. Madison met these moments with careful kindness, understanding that true strength often comes in mercy, not retaliation. She knew the scars of humiliation wouldn't disappear overnight, but each day she felt more whole, more herself. Sitting by the window one evening, Madison reflected on the journey from the dark pit of despair to this place of resilience and subtle victory. She understood now that humiliation, while painful, was not the end of her story. It was a catalyst for growth, for a deeper understanding of inner strength and grace. Her voice, once muffled by doubt and fear, had become a beacon, not only for herself, but for anyone who felt wrongly diminished by the world around them. In reclaiming her power, Madison wrote a new chapter not defined by others' cruelty, but by her courage and compassion. The road hadn't been easy, but the journey revealed that sometimes the greatest triumphs arise from the harshest falls. If you are standing where Madison once stood, betrayed, judged, and hurting, remember this: the path to justice and self-worth may be steep, but each step forward is a step toward reclaiming your life and your dignity. Never underestimate the strength born from endurance and kindness. One chilly afternoon, as the sunlight filtered softly through the dusty blinds of Madison's small office cubicle, a message unexpectedly popped up on her screen. It was from Claire, one of the senior managers known for her keen sense of fairness, but also for maintaining a guarded distance from office politics. The message was brief, but carried an unmistakable weight. "Can we talk? I think there are things you need to know." Heart pounding, Madison felt a mix of apprehension and hope as she accepted the invitation for a private meeting. When Madison arrived at Claire's office, the atmosphere was tense, yet sincere. Claire closed the door behind them, her face set not with judgment, but with concern. "I've been watching what's been happening," she began carefully, "and it's not right. You've been misunderstood, and even worse, some people have been spreading false stories about you to cover their own mistakes." Madison listened, a flood of emotions washing over her: relief, disbelief, but also a deep ache for the truth finally being voiced. Claire continued, "There's something else. During the last project, evidence surfaced that it wasn't your error that caused the setback, but a collaboration failure on their part. The facts are there, but many are too quick to judge without seeing the whole picture." She pulled up emails and data she'd quietly collected, piecing together the puzzle with quiet precision. Madison's eyes welled up as clarity replaced the fog of confusion and self-doubt. The humiliation she felt so keenly had been built on lies and misdirection. But the revelation didn't end there. Claire offered Madison support to present these findings to HR and upper management, ensuring the truth would finally come to light. Though nervous, Madison felt an awakening courage, a flame igniting where despair once dwelled. "Thank you," she whispered, voice trembling. "I never thought someone important would stand with me." News of the investigation's commencement trickled through the grapevine, evoking a spectrum of reactions. Those who had eagerly joined the chorus of disparagement found their certainty shaken. Some tried to dismiss the change with sour comments, while others watched, intrigued and uncertain. Madison noticed their shifting gazes, no longer filled with scorn, but with a flicker of respect or hesitation. The day the HR meeting convened, Madison stood patiently as her colleagues filed in. She held her head high, even as whispers swirled around her. Then Claire presented the compiled evidence, clear, irrefutable, and profoundly just. Faces that had once smirked now showed surprise, discomfort, and some rare moments of remorse. The room was hushed, the weight of truth settling over the crowd. As the meeting concluded, Madison felt a renewed sense of agency. The power dynamics were shifting, and she was no longer the silent victim, but an active agent of her own story. The antagonists' grip weakened visibly, their smiles fading, their usual arrogance dampened by undeniable facts. In the days that followed, subtle changes marked the atmosphere at work. Whispered criticism gave way to cautious conversations. Exclusionary glances softened into nods of acknowledgement. Madison's demeanor transformed too. There was a new calm assurance in her posture, a quiet confidence born not of conquering others, but of reclaiming her own truth. If you've ever found yourself trapped by false accusations or misunderstood in a world quick to judge, take heart. Sometimes the unveiling of truth comes from the most unexpected allies and moments of vulnerability. It's in these moments that courage grows and injustice begins to unravel. Keep faith in your strength to face what lies hidden beneath surface judgments.